Haunting of the Perron family. On a freezing January morning in 1971, the Perron family pulled into the long driveway of a farmhouse that looked as though it had been standing for centuries, because it had. Roger and Carolyn Perron, along with their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, had spent years saving for this property in Harrisville, Rhode Island. At first glance, it was everything they dreamed of. A sprawling, 10-bedroom colonial home, built in 1736, surrounded by rolling farmland, ancient stone walls, and trees that whispered in the winter wind. To them, it was the perfect place to start fresh. But old houses carry old histories, and this one, as they would learn, carried secrets buried deeper than its foundations. The first signs. From the very first day, the Perrons sensed something was different about their new home. While unloading boxes, one of the daughters noticed that the family dog, a gentle animal by nature, refused to enter the house. Instead, it crouched on the porch, growling at the open door as though warning them not to step inside. By nightfall, the dog was found dead in the yard, its body twisted unnaturally. Inside, the house smelled faintly of rot and dampness, as if centuries of sorrow had seeped into the wooden beams. The floorboards creaked even when no one walked across them. The windows rattled, although there was no wind, but the Perrons, practical and hopeful, brushed these things aside. Moving into an old farmhouse, they reasoned, meant learning to live with quirks. Yet within days, the quirks grew harder to ignore. Gentle spirits. Not all the encounters were frightening in the beginning. The daughters spoke of small, harmless presences. At night, they felt unseen hands tuck them into bed. Toys that had been scattered on the floor were neatly arranged by morning. Sometimes, faint laughter echoed down the halls, like children playing somewhere just out of sight. April, the youngest, claimed to have made a friend, a spirit she described as the little boy who would talk to her when she was alone. The family tried to dismiss it as imagination, but deep down, they knew April's descriptions were too vivid, too real. The Perrons came to believe that some of the spirits were simply former residents who hadn't moved on, lingering in the house they once called home. These friendly spirits almost gave them comfort, a strange sort of companionship. But behind this thin veil of warmth, something darker stirred. The dark presence. As weeks passed, the house revealed its true nature. At first, the disturbances were small, doors slamming on their own, brooms disappearing and reappearing in odd places, clocks stopping at the same time each night. Then, things escalated. Nancy and Christine were often woken by the feeling of a tugging on their legs, as though something was trying to pull them out of bed. Cindy complained of whispers that urged her to stay quiet. Andrea, the eldest, wrote years later that nights were filled with the stench of rotting flesh, cold winds that came out of nowhere, and shadows that swallowed the light. Most terrifying of all was the presence that seemed to target Carolyn, the mother. At night, Carolyn felt sharp pinches on her skin, as if invisible needles were pricking her. She was sometimes pushed, once so violently that she fell to the floor. She grew weak, pale, and thin, as though the house itself was draining her. The children often saw her staring blankly into corners, whispering to no one, the history of the land. Determined to understand what was happening, Carolyn began digging into the history of the house. What she found was chilling. The farmhouse had been home to generations of the Arnold family, who had lived and died there for almost 8 decades. Death was no stranger to the property. Records showed suicides, drownings, murders, and strange accidents that stained the land. Children had perished in nearby streams. A farmhand had been found hanging in the barn. One figure stood out among them, Bathsheba Sherman, a woman who lived in the mid-1800s. Rumors painted her as a witch who had sacrificed infants to the devil. Though never convicted, she was despised in town, accused of cruelty and dark practices. Local law claimed she cursed the land and anyone who dared to take it from her. The Perrons became convinced that Bathsheba's spirit, or something born of the legend surrounding her, was tormenting them. Bathsheba's wrath. The attacks on Carolyn intensified. She often awoke with bruises and marks across her body. Once, she claimed to see a grotesque woman, her head twisted and her eyes hollow, standing over her bed. The apparition shrieked, then vanished, leaving Carolyn paralyzed with terror. Bathsheba's presence made itself clear. She wanted Carolyn out. On multiple occasions, Carolyn reported being pinned down by an unseen force, unable to move or breathe. She felt as though something was trying to take her place as mother of the household, to claim her husband and children as its own. The girls, too, suffered. Andrea recalled nights when the entire house shook violently, as though struck by an earthquake. Yet outside everything remained still. They began to sleep together in one room, too afraid to be alone. Enter Ed and Lorraine Warren. By 1973, the family was desperate. Word of their haunting reached Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators known for their work on high-profile cases. The Warrens visited the farmhouse and quickly concluded that the Perrons were indeed plagued by a dark, inhuman spirit. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, sensed the oppressive force of Bathsheba immediately. The Warrens attempted a séance in the home, hoping to communicate and perhaps drive the entity away. What followed became one of the most terrifying nights of the Perrons' lives. During the séance, Carolyn fell into a trance. She began speaking in a strange, guttural voice not her own. Her chair levitated, then crashed violently to the ground. The children screamed as their mother writhed, contorted, and finally collapsed, unconscious. Roger, horrified, demanded that the Warrens leave. He feared their attempts only made things worse. From then on, the Perrons endured the haunting on their own. Years of terror. The haunting stretched on for nearly a decade. Some nights were quiet, almost normal, while others plunged the family into chaos. They learned to live with the spirits, to adapt to the terror as though it was another member of the household. Andrea later described it as a war of attrition. The family would not leave, and the spirits would not relent. Over time, the Perrons developed a strange resilience. The girls grew accustomed to the shadows that passed through their rooms, to the feeling of eyes watching them from the darkness. Carolyn, though frail, held on for the sake of her family. In 1980, after 10 years of torment, the Perrons finally left the farmhouse. They moved away, carrying with them memories they would never escape. Aftermath. The Harrisville farmhouse still stands today, known by many as the Conjuring House. Its dark legacy lives on, attracting investigators, historians, and thrill-seekers from around the world. For the Perrons, the haunting was more than just a story. It was a chapter of their lives, written in fear. Andrea Perron later published books recounting their experiences, ensuring that the voices of the past would never be silenced. As for Bathsheba, her legend remains entangled with the land, her name whispered whenever the farmhouse is mentioned. Whether she was truly a witch or simply a victim of rumor, her spirit, or something claiming to be her, left a mark that time cannot erase. The legacy of Harrisville. The story of the Perron family has since inspired films, books, and countless debates about the existence of the supernatural. But for those who lived it, no cinematic retelling could ever capture the raw fear of waking at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in an empty hallway, or watching your mother's body lift into the air by forces unseen. For the Perrons, Harrisville was not just a haunted house. It was a reminder that history never truly dies, that some stories are etched into walls and soil, waiting to be relived. And as long as the farmhouse stands, the question will remain. Was the Perron haunting the curse of Bathsheba, or the echo of centuries of tragedy bound to that land? Every house has a story, some darker than others. Like, share, and subscribe for the next one.